ambitious like a basketball player, and he wants to make the world a better place, and he is doing that. Okay, take it away.
All right. Thank you, Kathy, Dr. Masis. So, Oki, Nitanaku Sikumi Oktas. My name is Donnie Wetzel. I'm from Blackfeet tribe, and the Amskapi Pikuni is south of Canada. Our Blackfoot Confederacy was big and huge, and it did run all the way down to Bighorn, down to Yellowstone. Most of Montana was our lands. And so I'll just kind of share a little bit about some of the work I'm doing, some of the lessons that we teach. And I work directly with youth, and I have for a very long time. And I started out in the realm of suicide prevention. So I was going to share a presentation with you guys, and then I can get into a little bit more about my background. Let me see if this works. So I haven't seen Kathy in years, a long time. So it's always good to hear from her, and honored to meet everybody here, and just to hear how you guys introduce yourselves and say where you're from. I mean, it's really exciting. So this here is an image of students. I run student Native youth conferences. And so we're always talking about knocking down walls that separate our people, these invisible walls. And, you know, US is one of the few places that separates us by color, which is just not even right. So what I do with a lot of youth is I bring Native youth, non-Native youth, anyone together, and just really knock down misconceptions of each other. So I'll kind of share some of those lessons that we do at that level, and then we can visit. So I'm from the Amskapi Pikuni tribe. My grandfather was a Blackfeet chairman for years in the 50s and 60s. He fought relocation and termination. He fought so many things back then, and he was good friends with John F. Kennedy, and he just worked for the people. So I was brought up around him and his guidance in many ways. My father was coach, so we're very athletic family. So up in Montana, basketball is kind of runs all of our Indian country. You know, we just that's what connects all of us. So my father he was one of the first natives to ever graduate, enrolled members of a tribe to ever graduate Division I level basketball. All 4 years he played. Then he went back and moved back to the Blackfeet reservation and started coaching there. And he met my mother. My mother's there. She would be I joke because I say that she's 7th generation Montanan, farmers, ranchers. My dad's 100 generation of the continent. So they met up, and that's my background of my family. Those are my kids there, and my wife and my children. So I think talking to Kathy, it was I was kind of getting an understanding of your group. I'd like to learn more. But I'll kind of talk to you about what we try to push within our youth. And I'm in education, and I'm not so much into higher grades. I'm into higher life expectancies. And I told you I started out in suicide prevention. I was born and raised on the Blackfeet reservation, and then moved around down to Missoula, if you're familiar with Montana area. I moved around a lot, and as you see, I'm a light-skinned Blackfeet. And it was the first time I ever really, I guess in a way, experienced racism. Is I had all of born and raised in the Blackfeet reservation. I had all these non-native people tell me that I wasn't Indian. And I never even understood that concept because I grew up there. I grew up in that world, you know. And it was outsiders saying, "Oh, you don't look Indian. You're not Indian." And it was a really weird life for me in my early stages. If you're from a reservation, it's the most welcoming place in the world. You know, we have a lot of dogs. We have a lot of families that open doors. Anywhere you go, you got a meal and you can throw rocks. I mean, it's just the best. Up where we go, you can light fireworks all year round. all, all these things, you know. And when I got out of there, I noticed all the fences and the blockiness and all the closure. And it was something that I think as I've gotten older, I really understood that that was a big impact to me, you know. I couldn't run on a guy's yard, and it was just strange stuff, strange stuff. So we moved around quite a bit, and like Kathy was talking about, basketball and sports. I did every sport: track, football, baseball, basketball. It was kind of my foundation, and it's what made me okay because I'm pretty shy kid. But if I just give me a basketball, I'd be okay. So I made friends in those ways. But over the years, you really start to understand relationships. And I was a professional new kid, and so it was always about building those bridges. And I also found it with my light skin, I could also hear what people actually thought of my native people. It was frustrating to me, and it was injustice to me. So I'd do little things here and there, and to stick it to the man type things. But over the years, I really started to understand that it's just really ignorance. And how can we get people together and to drop all these misconceptions? And so um, that's been a lot of my passion. And then when you talk about where I was really deep into suicide prevention, it really gets down to the uniqueness of who we are as humans, and how we need to be better to ourselves and be better to each other. So as I've went through my life, I got my name Sikamioktas from George and Molly Kicking Woman. And it was a direct connection. It's Black Horse. And it was direct connection to my grandfather, who was Blackfeet man, six in them. And so there's a whole story behind all of that. But as I started to find out who I was, first and foremost, I'll share a few little lessons that anytime I meet with folks, I always bring these up because they really impacted me. Keep our heart in the decision we make. The most difficult journey is only 14 inches. That's the journey from our heart to our mind. That's the difference from our heart to our mind. And it's tough because sometimes we get too stuck in our mind and we forget our heart. Our heart is our spirit, it's our soul, and how we have to always have that there is more important. And then seventh generation understandings. This is how I was taught. Everything I do, the reason I am sitting here is goes 7 generations back. My relatives brought me to this point. This moment isn't it about me? It's about keeping the path going and the beauty and strength going that they left for me sitting right here. And every decision I make right now affects my children, grandchildren, great great grand, all the way through. So you have that concept, you dropped ego. It's never about me. It's about those that brought me here, and everyone that was, all the shoulders that I'm on, and everything I do has to impact. So I got to do the best with my decisions every day and my children. And so the importance of handshakes was something my grandfather taught me. It's a connection. In some societies and some cultures, it's a power thing. You shake that hand and you kind of, oh hey man, trying to power it. But it's really a connections of our spirits. It's like I was taught to never walk between two people talking, because there's energies going back and forth. There's something happening there. And so these simple things, and then the power of your voice. One of my great mentors is John Eagle. He's from Standing Rock, Fort Yates. He talks about it in the most simplest form. Within our voice, we have the power to lift up or tear down. And it's very important that we measure and watch what we say to each other, to ourselves. For instance, if I have a child over here and I talk to him, you're bad, you're no good, you're ugly, I don't like you. That child's going to live up to those standards. On the other hand, you're beautiful, I love you, you're strong. They're going to live up to those standards. And so just being careful how we speak to each other, how we speak to ourselves, because that goes out into the universe and it becomes living. You know, you all probably have these same teachings. And so just the voice, that's why it was difficult the last few years, how people, we're still dealing with it, how people talk to each other. Boy, it's, you know, anymore, you'd rather get punched in the face than be talked to like people do anymore. You know, so it's like, that's something I'm very careful with. Then to reconnect to our roots. You know, you look at what they did to our tribal people, and I'm sure you all know these things. I'll go into it just a little bit, but um, when they came onto this land, they cut the roots of our people. They cut it clean and said, "You're no longer this. You're gonna be this over here now." And so when I talk to our youth, I'll encourage them. You know, get your name, understand your stories. Talk to your grandparents if they're willing to talk. If the boarding schools and missions didn't do the damage, if they have stories, listen to them, because a tree will not thrive without its roots. And with our indigenous nations on this continent, they tried to cut our roots and they failed for the most part. And so I always remind that you got to know where you came from, and then always open our minds to things. Everything I do, especially working in suicide prevention, I really come from a strength-based attitude in language in any way, shape, or form I can. I've always been taught, and I'm learning more. I just got back into, I was asked to be part of one of our ancient societies that has come back to Amskapi Pikuni, and I'm learning so much. If I could, that's all I would do. That's all I would do. I wouldn't do nothing else. I just live in that world. We have elders that are teaching us so much, but first and foremost, we are created perfectly. We are created exactly as we are supposed to be. And to love that, to accept that, to be good. And we're in a world now where you have Instagram, you got all these people trying to be someone else. And the simplicity of it is you were created exactly as Creator made you. And to love that and honor what you have. Use the gifts that you've been given. And then you know, when you believe in yourself, you can believe in others. And I'm also a coach, so I have a really strong coaching mentality that I'll do the best I can with the students, but they have to go out there and they have to do the work, you know. And I think we need a little bit more of that, using the potential and the skills they have. In our Blackfeet way, our whole goal in life is to become Nisitapi. Nisitapi is to become human, to become a real human. That's our whole goal in life. And, you know, I had a 92-year-old one time tell me he's an infant in his knowledge. And this was an elder that spoke 3 languages, that knew ceremonies, but how we're constantly learning, constantly. And we'll go through life to become the best human is our ultimate goal. These are just leftover pieces of when I work with youth that I didn't take off, but I talk to youth in these ways. I try to encourage them to find their voice. We practice with them. We practice here, grab the mic and speak up. We give them the skills and fundamentals to create the missions and the activism that we want, you know? And so I'm really big on that. And also the fact that within so many of our teachings are the answers to the world. And so just listening to some of the things that Kathy was telling about you all, you're very conscious of our connection to the earth and how that relationship is just, I mean, it's top of the tops. So I think sometimes I'll put this out there. A lot of people don't understand that, you know, we're not a race. Our tribes are indigenous to this land. There was treaties that were signed. They hold the highest authority of all things. And within those treaties, they were to provide health, law, and education. And they failed all of those. They failed them. And we become kind of in almost a dependency state, still waiting for them to fulfill what they said they would do. A big coup is Deb Howland getting in there, Interior Secretary. Those are almost tied to I don't know if you guys have these as well, but the prophecies that this is all going to come back around, that our indigenous knowledge will bring balance back to this. And when I speak of indigenous, I speak of the actual knowledge and relationships of all people. Like, like there's indigenous people of Ireland. I'll tell a story about my wife. Ireland had its own languages, dances, cultures, everything, societies. I always tell people, I said, you're not so far from our tribes. Watch Braveheart and watch how much they fought for their people. Watch what the Brits did to them. That just came across that ocean, So we're so much closer than, society wants us to be. But I'll get into the little bit on the boarding schools. They really took a shot at wiping us out. Kill the Indian, save the man. And so education in our country is not so well taken in a lot of our communities. It's why there's a constant fight. So a lot of my goal is to flip that script and use the education system to reconnect. Like when they came on board, they were trying to wipe us out and connect us to their ways. What we're trying to do is reconnect our ways, bring in our elders into school systems, speak the language, immerse the children in who and what they are and the beauty and power of it. So you can see some of those pictures. It's very difficult. You know that our children had a 50% chance to make it out of boarding schools. 50% chance. Those children that passed away, the families would not even hear about it. And that really fires me up. But I'll shift to more of the solutions and in the fact that, geez, we're still here. I worked right with the kids, and if you're ever interested, I'd like to have them. I could share a recent MMIW presentation that a group of youth that I worked with presented on. And it's so articulate how they say it. I might share that with you, Dr. Massis. Within a lot of my work, there's a lot of misconceptions. When people think, oh, well, why don't all you tribes, and it doesn't matter. I've had people of all backgrounds and colors say, why don't all you tribes just get together and join forces and sing Kumbaya? And I'll say, well, why don't all those white folks over in Europe all get together and join forces and sing Kumbaya? Because they're not white, they're not red, they're German, they're this, they're that. And so I'll show this map to say, look at how many, there's 574 now federally recognized tribes in the United States of America. And every one of them had their own unique cultures. There's a couple shared languages, this and that, but that's the beauty of what we have sitting in these lands, in that it's still here, and but I like to show that sometimes. People don't know the concepts of that. And, I've even had some African American friends tell me, hey, why don't you join together like we have? I said, well, it's different. Now, if Africa joined forces, then it's the same. But over here, geez, we got histories. We have connections and sacred connections to this land and all that it brings. Kathy was kind of talking about some of the things that we're looking at. I'm really big on communication, and we try to create an atmosphere with outsiders coming into our school systems to understand some of the relationships with our tribes. I'm more so reading and learning out of a book is one thing, but I'm more, let's get people together. Let's get folks together and just simplify this thing. So like, for instance, it gets frustrating, but some people will say, well, geez, I just don't know. We go into these communities and we're there to help, and they just don't take us right. They don't do this, they don't do that. And so like, we'll talk about concepts. When you're in Japan and you go into a house and you have your shoes on and someone says, hey, you got to take your shoes off in my home. Okay, you take your shoes off. Then imagine you come back and the person comes walking in with the shoes on again. You're like, well, what's with these folks? You know, they know that they're not supposed to do that. In just that simple explanation, I say, do you do that in our tribal communities? Do they say, hey, you got to kind of watch this, watch that, and then you show up and you don't respect what you were taught? The whole thing's done before it starts. And how can we get better at learning a little bit more and have cultural humility? I like cultural humility because an elder once told me that we have to be humble, and no one's better than the other. It's just everybody does things in very unique, beautiful ways, and to be more accepting of that stuff is the ultimate goal. um so if you guys understand Maslow, it's very interesting, and you could look it up. Maslow went and spent time in the Blackfoot Nation. A lot of the basis of the things that he learned was from Blackfeet. He's a little bit different though. Within our tribe, the ultimate part you see on the bottom, its ultimate is your self-actualization. So the way we are taught and the way we go through life is we must find who we are first and foremost, love who we are, take care of that, all that things I was saying earlier, love the gifts and use them to the ultimate, but be comfortable in your own skin. And we say that all the time. If you don't love yourself and you're expecting your boyfriend or girlfriend to love you and use that energy, it doesn't work. You have to love yourself first. And so then that moves up into the community loving themselves, doing their part, understanding their roles, and then up through the tribe where you have that cultural perpetuity. And so like, it's interesting when we look at these different perspectives and how Maslow really learned a lot from our Blackfeet. And I can get into that a little bit more, but I know we don't have too much time. When I work with youth, we talk about identity. Like I told you before, I was brought up as an athlete. It took me to be in my late 20s to find out my connections to my Amskapi Pikuni. But within America, within most of the world, your identity is your job or the title you earned or the degree you get or how much stuff you may have or the money you make. And in its purest form, who are you when you peel all that away? So in my own journey, I've had different kind of lessons learned throughout all of that. I'll tell you the story about my wife, and it connects to that Irish story I was saying earlier. I took my wife to get her Blackfeet name, and she's Irish descent. And she got her name. Her name is Isumaka, which means runs in front. And she's like, why would I be called runs in front? I said, well, that's your spirit, though. That knows more about you than you know about yourself. And she's like, well, this doesn't make sense. Well, it's made sense since then. And I'll always say, I said, you try to act like that's your spirit. That's who you are to your core. But when we were walking out of that ceremony, it was a 9-hour ceremony, a bundle ceremony. So Blackfeet, we open bundles at certain times of the year. And she was crying and she was painted up, and I was hugging her and I was like, what's going on? You okay? And she said to me, I can't believe you still have this. I can't believe you still have this. She said, I know my Irish people had these things, and I don't even know if it still exists. And it made me think about that because I grew up in Blackfeet country and then, moved around, and it really made me take ownership. I have to take advantage of that and learn as much as I possibly can. I need to know who I am and where I'm from and all my people. But she started to research her family and found out that her greats met in Butte, Montana. And so she researched even further. The great grandfather that came across was actually arrested for teaching his Irish language, his Indigenous language, his Indigenous culture and teachings. He was arrested and they're going to send him to Australia. And he jumped ship and come across. I mean, if the similarities aren't just smacking you right in the face, I mean, it's just crazy. So we actually went back to Ireland, and her great great greats lived 20 miles apart, didn't know each other in Ireland, but met in Butte. And I always teased her. I said, boy, oh boy, I got to watch myself. You touch that soil, that's your native soil. You're going to come at me. And she was just connected to that land, and you could just feel it. It was just a beautiful thing. But I like to share that story because it's just those lessons that we have. I often really dig into perceptions of wealth, and how, again, our identities connect to wealth, connect to money. And if we get down to it, I always say, when you're on your deathbed, what do you want around you? The new car you had, the home you earned, or all this stuff? Or do you want your family? Everyone will always say family, pretty much. And it's these simple things that we get caught up in. Kathy brought up a lot of the instances that are happening across our country. And it's a very, very frustrating thing because it's just no good. There's so much more to this world. And I do believe that it's shifting because the youth are making it shift. I see the youth healing our own communities. Youth are getting their names when their parents didn't have them. Youth are getting their faces painted when their parents were told that was evil. They're coming home, and parents are taking a step back and realizing that, hold on, I might have something here, because our country is stuck and lost it's spiritually disconnected. And some could say it's to the earth, it's to each other, it's just spiritually disconnected. And there are prophecies that are teachings, indigenous teachings, like I just said, those Irish teachings from way back to our Blackfeet to all where you come from, will bring balance back as we start to reconnect and have relationships with all things around us. And I do believe that. It's probably not going to happen in my lifetime, but I think of my children. My children are growing up with me in a teepee lodge in the summer for 2 weeks. They know their names. They can greet me in the morning in their languages. And it's things that I could never imagine that would ever have happened. And so it's coming. And I think everybody's just got to keep fighting, because we can outdo all the bad that's happening out there. And you look at just this last year with COVID, I think COVID took out the distractions like March Madness, which is on behind me, football, basketball, all of these things that keep us distracted while the system cranked along. I think it slowed it all down, and we started to look at what's going on. And there's been so much drastic change in the last year that I am almost like, I think we're at the kitchen sink part where they're throwing the kitchen sink to try to maintain control and power. And it's not going to work. It's not working. And I do have great faith and hope in those things. But that's one of my favorite quotes there, because I try to bring them together. Like I said, I'm Blackfeet, I'm Irish, and I'm German. And I want to know more about my German side. I want to know these things because there were tribes in Germany. There were tribes. If you watch some of these shows, the similarities are just all there. It's just different times that it happened. And so who better to teach this reconnective way than our Indigenous people on this continent, who still have that natural ability and natural connections, 2% in this continent. And I love that you guys introduce yourself and you said, these are my homelands. This is before colonization, because it drives me nuts how people split us up. Mexico, United States, they're all indigenous. They're all indigenous to this, the whole Americas, it's just a beautiful thing. But I love that quote because I think that's what we do. I always say we got to braid these things. We got to braid our ways and these new ways, because that's how it is. And there is good new ways. And so that's pretty much my presentation. And I can share this with Kathy if you're interested, but again, I'm honored to be able to meet you guys and speak. And so if you want to visit a little bit, I'm down for that. I don't know how long you got, but thank you for your time. Yeah.
Thank you so much for being here, Dawn. Kathy, do you
Thank
want to stay on a little? I can
you.
leave the line open.
Don, okay. If anybody knows that they have to leave because they had only till 7, you could let us know. So you don't, yeah? So,
If we stop to visit, oh, sorry. If
and
we
the
stop,
people back, yeah, go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say, if we stop to visit, can we stop recording?
Oh, yeah, please.
Okay.
Give me
thank
one
you.
second.
Thank you.